Hello and welcome to Hot Pursuit, part of Ahval podcast and video series. Today we are going to speak about the upcoming meeting between US President Joe Biden and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. A critical meeting by any vantage point you look at. It's been expected to be perhaps tense, perhaps less tense, we don't know, but this is the first face-to-face meeting between these two presidents, two leaders. Biden, since he took office, avoided contacting Erdogan, despite the fact that Turkish president represents a country with the second largest army in NATO, a NATO ally, a long-term ally of United States, but these are perhaps strange times. So we are going to talk about what to expect, what is at stake in this meeting with Merve Tahiroğlu. Good to have you here, Merve.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Merve Tahiroğlu is the program coordinator with a project on Middle East and democracy, a think tank based in Washington, D.C. Yes, let's start with the expectations. What should we realistically speaking expect from this meeting on Monday, June 14 in Brussels?
I personally wouldn't expect much out of it. I think Ankara has very high expectations of this meeting. We've been seeing their messaging in the past few days, weeks, even months since that very awkward and tense phone call that the two presidents had, in which President Biden basically informed Erdogan that he was about to recognize the Armenian genocide and make a historic decision for the US the following day. And that seems to have been the only message that he gave in that phone call.
It was at April 24 and almost at the end of April.
Exactly. So it's been a while, and part of I think Erdogan and Ankara's face-saving tactic after that phone call, which I really think was a scandal from that point, from Ankara's point of view. The face-saving tactic was to say, okay, we are now focused on this NATO summit that we will have in Brussels on June 14, 15, and we're going to have a meeting. Erdogan will have a meeting, in-person meeting with President Biden, and in that meeting, the two leaders will open a new page in the relationship and have this so-called reset that Ankara has been pushing for. So the messaging we've been getting in the past few days is that from Ankara, they're saying that we have a bunch of solutions that we want to offer in terms of the key bilateral problems between Turkey and the US. Most importantly, Turkey's acquisition and now possession of the Russian S-400 missile defense system, which the United States considers a threat to both its F-35 fighter jets, but also to NATO more broadly, because Turkey is a NATO ally. So it's quite strange that it has this possession of a Russian missile defense system. So all of this, I think, indicates to me that Ankara really wants an image out of this meeting on Monday of positive US-Turkish relations. So they want to be able to leave this meeting with a readout of it or a statement out of it saying that they have come to some sort of a resolution in one of the major bilateral issues between the two sides. Mainly the S-400 looks like that's what they're focused on, but I don't think that Washington has a similar expectation. They've been sort of brushing off this meeting or haven't been placing as much importance to it. They've been saying from the beginning that this will be a meeting on the sidelines of the NATO summit. So I think Washington's expectations of this meeting are very low, but Ankara's expectations are really high. So it'll be interesting to see how the meeting ends.
In an article most recently for Foreign Policy, which you penned together with ex-ambassador Eric Edelman, ambassador formerly in Ankara in early 2000 millennium. And this article is focused on several items that has to do with the meeting. And there you are arguing that Biden, from his side, should push for staunchly for three changes, because these three changes have to do with the main concerns, mainly about human rights, democracy, and perhaps most of all, the rule of law, which the Turkey has been failing grossly in the latest years, according to agreed critics worldwide. So can you elaborate on that? What your arguments are that Biden should push?
Well, of course. So, I mean, there are multiple problems between the two countries. Many of them relate to foreign policy disagreements. So the S-400 issue is one major problem. Turkey's actions in the Eastern Mediterranean that threatened, that previously, well, it has sort of dampened nowadays, but that was threatening Greece and Cyprus in the Eastern Mediterranean is another example. Disagreements over policies in Syria is another example. So we know that when the two leaders meet, they will have a lot of issues to discuss. And
Yeah.
them will relate to foreign policy and national security related issues. But what we argue is that the Biden administration has said itself, self-declared, that for this administration, unlike the Trump administration, for example, democracy, the trajectory of democracy globally, and human rights are very important and will be priorities for US foreign policy going forward. If that is the case, indeed, for the Biden administration, then we need President Biden to make that message very clear to President Erdogan, because I think what Ankara's expectation is that if Ankara can come up with some solution to one or more of these foreign policy issues, such as the S-400s, then that will be enough to put the US-Turkish relationship back on track and open a new page or create a reset or so forth. That is a complete wrong reading of the Biden administration, per the administration's own statements and declarations. And if that is the case, then we need Biden to actually say to Erdogan not only that the US really cares about the rule of law, human rights, and democracy in Turkey, which every single statement coming out of the Biden administration since January has repeatedly made clear. We need in this in-person meeting for Biden to raise specific issues that are important for Turkey's democratic trajectory. And, we only picked three of them. Of course, there are several major ones. Turkey just in the past few months withdrew from the Istanbul Convention, which was an international agreement that it itself played a huge role in creating. The Boğaziçi University protests and the way Turkey intervened the Turkish government intervened against the protester there is a scandal in its very high proportions. The anti-LGBT homophobic rhetoric that came out of it. There are tons of issues, but we picked three top ones that we think, because this won't be a very long meeting, so they'll have a limited amount of time to raise any issue.
30 minutes more or less, which is very, very short, because there will be a simultaneous translation because Erdogan doesn't speak English.
Exactly. So I think, we said, in this meeting, you won't have that much time, and particularly given that you will have a host of other foreign policy issues to discuss, we really are asking President Biden to prioritize three issues that are both important for US values and important for Turkey's democratic trajectory. So the first one would be the continued prosecution of US consular employees in Turkey who are Turkish citizens. So we had the crisis with Pastor Andrew Brunson, who was a US citizen, and that was sort of under the aegis of US citizens who were unjustly prosecuted in Turkey a couple of years ago. To my knowledge, there are no longer any US citizens that are in jail in Turkey, but Turkish citizens who are employees or have been longtime employees of the US diplomatic mission in Turkey still continue to face either jail or house arrest, and their cases continue. All of them have convictions, but at least a few of them are still either in jail or under house arrest. So that continues to be a top issue for the US government. So that is definitely one. But besides that, we have the the continued and I think growing assault on the HDP, which is not only Turkey's second largest opposition party, but also a largest predominantly Kurdish party and represents 6 million votes. So Turkey just last week re-upped its intention, the Turkish government, its intention to shut down this political party, which would have huge implications in terms of political pluralism and democratic governance. And so we put the issue of the onslaught against the HDP as a top issue that will really determine, I think, the future of Turkish-Kurdish relations and political stability and pluralism and democratic governance in Turkey. And I want to underline stability here as well, because I don't know how bad things can shape up in Turkey if Kurdish citizens decide no longer to engage in the democratic voting process and all just decide to remove themselves from the legitimate politics entirely. And the third one is the ongoing onslaught against civil society organizations and leaders. And here we pick the example of Osman Kavala, because he's not only one of the most prominent, I would say, philanthropists and civil society leaders who's been in jail, but also there is a clear ruling by the European Court of Human Rights since December 2019 that he should be released immediately and unconditionally, and Turkey has not followed, the Turkish courts have not followed that order, even though by law they are required to follow the rulings of the European Court of Human Rights. So it both relates to the assault on civil society in Turkey, but also to Turkey's compliance with the rule of law at home and abroad. So these are the three issues that we just picked, in case there is time to discuss them. And we think it's important for Biden to mention these things to Erdogan, because that I believe is the only way to make it very clear to Ankara that even if the two sides, even if Turkey manages to come up with a problem to the S-400 issue or the Eastern Mediterranean issue or a bunch of other foreign policy issues that the two sides have, without real reforms and progress on the domestic front with regards to human rights and democracy, there is not going to be a new page in the US-Turkish relationship.
In the article, which is, I think, important for NATO, because the Lukashenko incident, basically the dissident or critical journalist hijacked from an airplane, caused a lot of stir in NATO, in the European Union as well, and that promises to be an issue again, because Turkish government probably successfully watered down the message given by NATO about this incident. How important will that be in the meeting, do you think?
I think that incident is a prime example of why the United States and Turkey's NATO partners need to care about the way President Erdogan is ruling Turkey, because this was a prime example of, we saw a horrific incident by a dictator, Lukashenko, taking a private airline and full of private citizens flying on a private airline and forcing that airline with its fighter jets
by lying. Also.
By lying, threatening, and threatening with jets to force that airline to go to make a stop and to apprehend or kidnap, I would say, a dissident, a Belarusian dissident. And this is a horrific incident, and so of course NATO came together and they wanted to show unison and come together and issue a very strong statement, in the same way that we have a lot of international leaders. For example, after the Charlie Hebdo terrorist attacks, we had a whole international leaders came together. It's important to show solidarity against such actions, and it's very important for NATO to show at this point to show that it has unity and make a very strong statement against this particular horrific action. And Turkey watered that statement down. This is a prime example of how Turkey's internal trajectory completely impacts the way it behaves in foreign policy and in globally and in multilateral institutions like NATO, like the OSCE, like other multilateral institutions like the Council of Europe, which are all aimed at protecting a rules-based democratic international order. So I think it shows that the more authoritarian Turkey becomes and the more it strays away from democratic values, it's only going to continue to play a spoiler role in these multilateral institutions that are aimed at safeguarding democratic principles around the world. And so we gave that example. I think this meeting between Biden and Erdogan coming at the NATO summit will be quite symbolic in that it will be fresh in everybody's mind what Turkey just did. So I think, that will have a huge impact on the way President Biden receives President Erdogan.
And finally, this final question: when they meet, these two leaders, of course, on personal level, they will have some concerns for themselves. One for Biden, of course, having promised over and over again the promotion of democracy, promotion of core values of rule of law, human rights, etc. This is, I think, the first real challenge for him, meeting Erdogan, who, in the eyes of widespread opinion at home and abroad, represents a rough autocracy or autocrat profile. This, therefore, is important for Biden, for us also observers, how he will basically be able to handle that conversation. On the other hand, for Erdogan, it is also important because he's squeezed to a corner with the foreign policy, which I think unprecedentedly narrowed down in the entire modern Turkish Republic's history, almost nothing on plate anymore, and also deepening economic crisis, and less and less leverage, even in domestic politics. So for him, one could argue that the winning time again until next elections would be important, so that he would leave this meeting unbruised, unharmed, and perhaps presenting something to his own domestic audience. So, in your assessment, how can we see realistically this meeting ending? As argued by Stephen Cook, another prominent commentator from Council on Foreign Relations, I think he predicts sort of a by-meeting or sort of, a meeting that basically will kick the can further down the road in many issues. What is your assessment about these two perspectives from these two leaders' concerns, perhaps?
Yeah, I agree with Stephen, and I think I would be very surprised if anything concrete comes out of this particular meeting. It will be embarrassing for President Biden to embrace a leader like Erdogan after he has portrayed himself as a defender of global democracy and human rights, and after vowing that he wants to put these things to the center of U.S. foreign policy. And I also think that on a personal level, unlike his predecessor, President Trump, I think, President Biden does not really have much love for strong men around the world. So on a personal level, I don't think he's going to get along with the type of leader that Erdogan is. And right now, Erdogan is, in addition to all of the horrific acts of repression he has committed just this year. So since Biden took office, since January, Boğaziçi scandal, the continued detention of people like Osman Kavala, the complete anti-Americanism coming out of the Turkish government, all of these things put together, I don't think that President Biden is going to want to give Erdogan a photo op that he wants. But I think for Erdogan, that photo op is very important, because the primary thing that he needs is to fix Turkey's economy. And the worse Turkey's economy gets, and right now it's really at the brink of a crisis, the lower his public approval rate is in Turkey. The opposition is already calling for early elections. Even if there aren't early elections, there will be elections in about a year and a half or 2 years. And with his declining approval rate at home, Erdogan really needs to fix the economy. And I think the only way he can do that is by getting Western investment and international investment. And the only way he can do that is by projecting an image of positive relations with the United States, other Western partners, other NATO partners. So for Erdogan, it's really important to get a good photo op and some sort of positive statement or readout out of this meeting on Monday. So these are competing interests here. So I think it would be a shame if President Biden gives Erdogan that leverage, I would say, without getting...
That can be perceived by Erdogan as carte blanche, again, as in many previous meetings with international context.
Exactly. So I think it'll be a very interesting meeting to watch on Monday.
Mm-hmm. Yes, one should also see this in the context of this meeting, maybe giving direction or shedding light or giving inspirations to the further meetings. For example, the scheduled meeting in the European Union, the summit in the end of June, after a week, but also Council of Europe giving ultimatum to Turkey about the cases of Osman Kavala and Demirtas, June 22, and then the infringement process will be triggered as it states by the Council of Europe. So we will see all that. But I think no matter what, no matter the outcome, even if it's anticlimax or not, the meeting in June 14 will be an important one to watch. Merve Tahiroğlu, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
I've been joined by Merve Tahiroğlu, who is the program coordinator with the Project on Middle East and Democracy.